let's see. So we are now in the beginning of, let's say, another EPSO kind of big, how to say, saga. So I suppose that, as usual, you are kind of spread across a lot of, how to say, stages of the competition. And I see some of you, not necessarily competition, because you could be just going for a selection process, right? In any case, the selection process, whether it's contractual agent or whatever kind of interviews, and then whether it's the big EPSO competition, whether it's a temporary, whether it's an internal competition, right? Don't be, how to say, disturbed by the phrasing. The preparation is the same. Good. So we go throughout this preparation, and then that's why sometimes on the website I announce that this masterclass is for the internal competition, or sometimes I say this masterclass is for EPSO competition, or so on. But it doesn't really matter, because the tests are the same across all the selection processes. Makes sense? So keep that in mind. Do not, how to say that, do not refuse to attend the masterclass because I put only internal competition and I say, okay, this is only for the internal competition. No, it is not. But the same way as an internal competition has an interview that will be valid for contractual agents, and that will be valid for a big EPSO competition, and that will be valid for whatever interview you want to do for your professional life, right? So stay in that understanding that an EPSO process covers all the test, let's say, that you could have. Therefore, go through the master classes. You will certainly learn something for whatever process you are in. So now let's go from here and starting, how could I help? How could I accompany you in this? And I make reference especially to, let me see, because I didn't find participants. Well, I don't see. Well, reactions, they send the, anyway. I'm looking for something that I used to have on Zoom, but yeah, probably chats, right? Good, I found that. Great. So what I was saying is, how do I help you? And I'm thinking about the new competitions that are in financial assistance. Yes, we could start with the beginning of the process, which is rewrite your CV, rewrite your 4 questions, motivational questions, or rewrite a letter of motivation, or rewrite whatever application form, right? So keep in mind that we should start your preparation with that beginning, which is writing the documents. Now, you would say, yeah, but that doesn't matter because the jury doesn't check them. Well, you don't know, really. And then at a certain point in the process, the documents will be checked. So it's better you to have high quality documents from the very beginning, and then hopefully at a certain point they will check. I just wanted to give you one story. Yeah, it's a client. At that time, he went for the head of unit IT. And as I said, we started the process by rewriting his CV and the motivation letter and motivation questions, blah, blah. And then he did the selection process. Obviously, I accompanied him throughout. And then he got the position of a head of unit, And then at a certain point, he met the president of the jury in the corridors, right? And then the president of the jury said to him, you know, I wanted to say it at a certain point that your CV was the best CV that I have ever seen in the institutions. So, and then Dejan wrote to me on to say, Carmen, I owe you this feedback because obviously we have done together the documents, and the president of the jury saying, this is the best CV that I have ever seen. So if ever you doubt that the CV is important, or I'm telling you, I give you this example. And I have another one, was a client that she went for the council, right? For assistant position, the council. And so we have done, the best we could, but then she was not selected. Okay. But then something like 3 or 6 months later, she comes back to me and she said, I was selected. And I said, oh, how this happened? And then she said that they came back to me later, right? So that process was missed. We don't know why anyway, but they came to me and she said, and the head of the human resources told me that that's why he remembered me from the previous election, because my CV was impressive. And then, you see, based on that impressive CV, he came back to her, he invited her for an interview and, all the stories. And then, and then she passed this selection. And then obviously she came back to me to say, look, this is the way that he remembered me, through the CV. You see what? So you have two examples to say that the documents are important at a certain point or in a certain way. So start with the beginning. Now, so this is number one. Number two, the first preparation that probably you have to do, all of you, with exceptions, will be the CBT. And the CBT means verbal, numerical, and abstract reasoning test. This morning, I was doing the 3 hours CBT with in a private session with a client, because the point is that not only you have to practice, and obviously you have to practice, and then you have to practice months, but more than that, you need to have a good method, right? And unless you have a good method for the resolution of these verbal, numerical, and abstract problems, then your practice will be like running marathon with high heels. You follow me? So there is no point to practice, heavily and seriously and a lot of times and blah, blah, if you do not have a good method. So pay attention to the method first of all. And then, so this is number one, the method. Number two is the practice. And again, there are good sources with good exercises, and there are bad sources. So then again, if you practice on the bad source, then obviously you could not get good results. And secondly, you can even get depressed because you will never get good results. You follow me? So that's a very important element, the number two. And the number three is that there is a certain sequence in the way you prepare, right? So for example, this morning to my client, I said, look, do first only verbal, just in order to get the method inside and to know it well, and then to apply it correctly. And then you go only for, you add, the abstract, and then you add the numerical. And only when you see that your scores or you do well, then you take the whole thing, which is the exam, right? So do not start immediately with the whole exam and immediately on the, let's say, against the time, with the exam timing, because it's depressing, right? You start from zero, you run the marathon. No. Get that, how to say that, be nice to yourself and get this progression into integrating exercises, integrating another type, right? Now, according to the exam and according obviously to your situation, I would rather say start first with the easier. So if you have done law or what do I know, languages, probably the verbal reasoning will be easier for you. Start there because you will get some successes and then you will feel good about yourself, right? Instead of attacking head on the numerical, where in theory you will be weaker and that will be much more painful. You see, so again, I will do here an orientation or a choice of the exams according to your strengths, your weaknesses, and your ability to handle the exercise, because I would rather do first to build up some successes before attacking something that is really difficult for you. And that's a very individual situation, right? My client this morning, he's going for financial economics, and still he was kind of better on verbal and abstract than in the numerical, kind of, you see? So then the question is, how do you choose in order to get these early successes, as we call it, the low-hanging fruits, that will give you some confidence that you do well, and then you will move to the next, and then you move to the next. And then finally, when you do reasonably well, then you go for the exam, right? So you do one exam in the morning and one exam in the evening, or one exam at the lunchtime, but do not do 2 or 3 or 4 exams in one row. There is no point, because they are very difficult, obviously, and then after one exam, certainly you are very tired. So then you go on the second, there's no point. You have no juice left. So leave it like this and do something else. And then, I don't know, you come back on the lunchtime, late afternoon. And then I would say the point is that you should get scores about 8, to my mind, 8 out of 10, because then when you are in the exam, you could lose 2 points, you get to 6, right? But hopefully you keep 6 out of 10, hopefully. You see what I mean? If you have during the your practice, you have 6 or 7, but in the exam you lose the 2 points, you are under the risk that you don't get the, how to say, the passing marks, right? So for me, that's the point here. Be sure that you do good scores about 8. Now, if you do not have these 8 in scores, it might be that your method is not good. And to help you in that, I have a masterclass in 2nd of September on the CBT. That means verbal, numerical, and abstract. So obviously, you're invited to that. And in this masterclass of the 2nd, when I do verbal, numerical, and abstract, is an overview of the 3 tests, right? So you will get the methods of the 3. Now, if you want to do a more, how to say, dive in, then in the next Mondays, I will have one dedicated to the numerical, one dedicated to the verbal, and another one dedicated to the abstract, right? So you could have either the 3 together as an overview, and you could have them individual reasoning tests separate, right? So that you get, you know, a solid understanding, knowledge, and exercises together. Hopefully with that, you will be, how to say that, well taught, and then you could go into the practice, right? So this is, by the way, the September program, mainly covering the CBT, right? Nevertheless, there are another test that is very important for you, which is the MCQ in the domain of competence. Now, MCQ in the domain of competence means that in order to pass an expert exam, right, you will have to revise the substance. Now, In theory, you are the expert, in theory. In practice, whatever expert you are, you have to revise the domain of competence, the substance of the expertise. And that is why I organize on the 5th of September the MCQ templates. Right, let me take some water because I right. So, as I said, you have to start the revision of the substance quite soon because you have, how do I say, you have I don't know, financial economics or statistics or the crisis management, or where, first of all, that you don't even know what they want from you, not to mention that you have to search for the substance, and then you have to organize this substance on templates so that hopefully you can revise thoroughly, and then you place your templates in your head, right, in your memory. So it's a lot of work waiting for you. And because of that, I put the masterclass on the templates for the MCQ quite soon, in the 5th of September, because you have to start the revision. So whatever EPSO competitions you have and internal competitions, you need to start right now. Elisa asked me if I have a source to study for the IST finance. So that's not what I'm doing, right? I'm not the specialist in the IST finance. But when I do the masterclass, then this is the discussion that we will have, right? Where to find the source? What is the source, right? So, as I said, in the masterclass MCQ templates, then we will discuss about the sources, about how to prepare, how to search for the information, right? It's not that I could just give you like this in 2 seconds. So just to conclude on this, the masterclass on the MCQ templates is fundamental for you to have very soon now, in the beginning of the exam or the preparation of the exam, because you want to have enough time for the revision. And you don't want to wait until they call you for the MCQ, because there is no way to have a revision in 2 weeks, right? The revision takes months. And the same if you go for the 85, 86 internal competitions in a commission, you will need the revision of the European policies. It's the same story. The revision takes months. You need the structure, the templates. This is what we will do in the masterclass. You need to think about where to search for the information. And then you have to do your templates, which for the Commission for the policies, European policies, I do remember that my clients had about 50, 70, 80 templates, right? So it's a serious work. Now, I'm not saying necessarily that you have to do 80 templates, but I'm telling you that I have clients who prepared very thoroughly for this revision of the European policies with 70, 80 templates, right? So it's solid work. That's why you have to start it in September, without waiting for the announcement of the MCQ, because then it's too late to do something about that. Okay, so this was the second. Now, the next, the next test is the written test / case study, right? And again, this is a fundamental test because it's the test where they want to see whether you are able to write briefings to your management, right? So this is the question. You as a subordinate, you are supposed to write briefings to your manager. Are you able to? You see that? This is the question. So obviously the written test / case study / essay writing, it's always part of the selection process. And that is why I placed the masterclass in September. Let me check the date. I think it was 19th of September. Yes, 19th, Thursday, 19th of September is the masterclass on the case study / written test. Now, just to clarify for you, because in some competitions they call it case studies, in some other competition they call it written test. Now, the product, you understand what I'm saying? The final result, the assignment is write a briefing. So in that respect, the difference between the written test and the case study, it's minimal, because at the end you have to draft a briefing, right? But then what would be the difference? The difference is that if it is a case study, then the file is not in your domain of competence. So you have to read, you have to understand, you have to grasp the ideas, organize the ideas, blah, blah, and write the briefing. So this is the case study. And normally they do select the topics to be very far away from the domain of the competition. So imagine that you are financial economics, then they might give you, I don't know, nuclear protection, right? Something that, well, they think you have really no understanding. So this is a case study. And then obviously you take all the information from the file and you process on the file. There's no other thing that you could do, because in any case, you don't know the thing. So you process the file the best you can. Now, in the last, let's say, year, they gave the files in advance, 2 weeks in advance, right? So yes, there is a difference that instead of having your exam in 90 minutes and you have to swallow all the information in the 90 minutes, now you have the 2 weeks in advance preparation of the file. But still, it doesn't really help you, because even if you have a file in nuclear protection, but you're not a specialist, it's not that in 2 weeks you will learn nuclear protection, right? So it's still not, how to say, the difficulty of the topic is not in the topic itself. It is in communication skills. Because whatever, even if they give you 2 weeks, you will not get the substance, right? So we are still in the communication skills, and this is what they say in the notice. They will evaluate the communication skills, right? So this is the case study thing. Now, we go to the written test. What is the written test? As I said, still a briefing, okay, but the briefing will be in the domain of competence. That means in the domain of your exam. So, for example, you will have financial economics. Well, the file should be financial economics if it's a written test. Or crisis management should be a file in the crisis management, or should be a file in statistic, or should be a file in transport policy, or so on, right? So when we are talking about written tests in the domain of competence, right, the file should be in the domain of competence. And then obviously is not only that you get the information coming from the file, but you should bring information, you should bring knowledge, you should bring competence, you should bring understanding, because you are the specialist in the field. Makes sense? So I give you an example. We had about 2-3 years ago a Schengen competition, right? Schengen specialist. And the written test in the domain of competence had 2 documents. One was the Schengen regulation, and the other one was the Schengen guidelines. Now, you understand, and these 2 documents together, they had 100 pages. Now you will say, for God's sake, how do I handle 100 pages in 90 minutes? Well, my client said, well, it was not so difficult because I was working with these documents every day. You see the difference? So when we are talking about domain of competence, then in theory, you will understand the file quickly, and you know what's there, and you know why it's there, and da-da-da. And then in the problem solving that they ask you to, is not only the file that is useful, but it's all the knowledge that you have in the mind, right? Because you're an expert. And how do you know that they are, I say, written test in the domain of competence? Because in the evaluation criteria, you will have knowledge of the domain. Makes sense? So if in the evaluation criteria you have knowledge of the domain, then you are in the written test in the domain of competence, and then you have to be expert in the domain. Now, how do you, I hope you are expert in the domain. In any case, the fact that you revise for your MCQ, refresh your memories, right? Refresh your knowledge. So hopefully, not only that you are an expert in the domain of competence, but you refreshed the domain of competence by preparing, you remember what I just said, the templates for the MCQ. So if we come back now to written test in the domain of competence, the fact that you have done the MCQ templates will help you to revise. And then this revision that you have done from the MCQ, you will inject it in the written test in the domain of competence, because you will need it in order to solve the file, because you are supposed to act as an expert. Makes sense what I'm saying, right? So these are the 2 written that you will have for the ADs, right? We are talking about case study. We are talking about written test in the domain of competence. Then there is another, the 3rd written, like essay writing, that is normally given to assistants, right? And that, so when you see the masterclass that I announced the 19th, and I say case study, written test, essay writing, right? The 3 I covered in the same masterclass, because it's the same principle, which is write a briefing. Now, for the assistant, will not be a briefing in the domain, because this is not the definition of assistant job, but will be an essay writing on a theme that is like, I would call it common sense themes, right? So you could have a theme like, what's your opinion about teleworking? Or how can we improve the team spirit? Or how can we improve whatever motivation of staff when they work from home? You see what? So we are talking about themes where how can we improve the, let's say, equal treatment at work? How can we, let's say, diminish the discrimination, or how non-discrimination? You see, so as I'm saying, I call them common sense themes, right? Now, so therefore, in the masterclass, we still go through the templates, right? And The difference will be that here, instead of having a file to consult, the assistant normally have to write the essay from their understanding of the subject without any support from a file. Whilst in the AD competitions, normally they have the file either in the domain of competence or not. Anyway, so just to come back, until now we covered 4 things to prepare your exam. Number 1, the application documents, whether CV, motivation questions, or motivation letter. Number 2, the templates for the MCQ, right, where you revise either your substance or the European policies. Number 3, written test / case study / essay writing, where you're supposed to draft a written document, whether it's called briefing or note or report, however, it doesn't matter, it's a written document, right? So we have 3 things that we have done for the moment. And in theory, with that, you can get on the reserve list, right? Now, nevertheless, obviously, I continue the preparation for the whole process. So the next stage of the process will be interviews. Now, as I said before, we have 3 types of interviews, right? Now, the 3 types, whether they are together in 1 or they are separate in 3, that depends on the competition. So that's why I always prepare the 3 separate types of interviews, so that you have a very clear understanding of how they are managed, right? So number 1 is an interview according to EPSO EPSO competencies. So in order to help you in understanding EPSO competencies, there are a lot of Monday Boost on the YouTube channel, right? I have a YouTube channel, and on the YouTube channel, I have a lot, the last 20 or 50 Monday Boost videos explaining the EPSO competencies, right? So obviously, you go on the EPSO website, you take the anchors, you take the competencies, blah, blah. Now, nevertheless, these free videos on my YouTube channel explain the meaning of the competence, on how do you see it, how do you understand it, and then based on that, you could then construct your examples, right? And so this will come in a masterclass. I didn't propose it in September because the competitions are not yet in that phase of the interview, right? So if ever you have an interview yourself, then rather contact me and we'll see how we find a solution for you. Obviously, there's always the possibility.
Ciao, come va?
Ciao, come va? Io vado, però tu non puoi parlare. So what I was saying is that this is the first type of interview, right? Which is the interview on the EPSO competencies. Good. Now, second would be interview in the domain of competence, right? Now, the domain of competence, it's field-related interview, right? Like the ones who are here for some time, they understand, they remember field-related, right? Now, in the field-related, normally, we had the questions alongside the talent screener. Now, we don't have talent screener anymore, we have something else, doesn't matter. In any case, the field-related interview, we will go through the duties, right? Because we are in the domain of competence. So then the questions of such an interview will be, do you have experience in, right? And then they will ask you drafting policies, or drafting a budget, or implementing a project, or manage, I don't know, a communication campaign, right? So we are deep down in the specificity of your domain of expertise, and the questions will be, do you have experience in? And then obviously, if you say yes, they say, give me the example. Makes sense. So we are now in the second type of interview, which is field related, right? In the domain of expertise. And again, how do I prepare that? I will propose a masterclass probably in October. And how do I prepare it? I will take the notice, I will take the Annex 1, the duties, and I will go through very thoroughly. And I will ask my clients every single question about these competencies. These, sorry, not competencies, let's call it skills, duties, responsibilities, tasks, and so on, right? Because what we want to know in this particular field interview is that you have the experience, you know how to do the things. Whilst in the EPSO competencies, we would like to see that you are a nice person to work with. Makes sense? So there are two different things. Nice person, nice colleague, nice subordinate will be EPSO competencies. Specialist will be the field related interview, right? So these are the two. And then we are going for the number 3. And the number 3 would be situational judgment. Now, situational judgment are not examples, so this is important for you to see the difference. Are not examples from your life, like professional life. They are theoretical situation. That's why we call it situation judgment. So they are theoretical situations, and they ask you, how would you do? What would you do, right? So here, how I would work these, I will just go through a lot of situations from your professional life, and I will make a long list of such difficult situations, right? So we are talking about your boss gives you a task on Friday at 6 o'clock. What do you do? Or your boss calls you in the weekend and he said you have to come back to the office because we have to deliver something for the commissioner on Monday morning at 8. What do you do? Or you are supposed to organize a conference with a colleague and he leaves sick leave or holiday or whatever. What do you do? You see, so the questions are obviously difficult situations at work, and then you are supposed to give your best judgment on how to handle them. And then obviously what they want to see is whether your judgment is correct or not. Now, sometimes it's obvious, you see, if my boss said on Friday at 5 o'clock to finish something or to do something, probably I will do. But sometimes it's not obvious. What do you do if your colleague left you alone in the organization of the conference? You shut up and try to do it by yourself? But I don't know. What if you cannot do it? And then you will have a much bigger difficulty by the fact that you don't deliver. You see, so some of the situations are kind of obvious, or yeah, we could guess the correct behavior, but some of the situations are much more tricky. Like, what do? If you imagine you have to deliver a document with a colleague and he doesn't give his contributions, what do? Do you go to the boss or you don't go to the boss? Do you confront the colleague? I suppose so. Okay, you confront, but then what? What if that he doesn't do? Do you go back to confront him, or do you go to the boss? You see? So we are talking about tricky professional situations. And I would say, yes, I would prepare that. And we had in the past, we had the tests that are called situational CBI. And there are some institutions, I think I have a client from Committee of Region or something like that, and he said that he will have a situational CBI, which is the situational judgment test. So in any case, these questions are part of the interview, whatever interview you have. And sometimes these questions are part of a specific test, which is called situational CBI, right? So it's important for you to have in mind that, again, when I offer the masterclass on situational CBI, it is useful not only for a situational CBI, but is useful for the questions in the interview that are situational questions. Makes sense? Not to mention that they are useful for your professional life, because we are dealing with what do you do if, right? So these are very serious. And by the way, in the coaching of my managers, right, a lot of times I deal with this situation. So I have individual sessions, I have heads of unit, directors. Their question is always, what do you do? What do I do if, right? So a lot of subjects in the coaching for managers is exactly the situational judgment. So I would say learn it now. So by the time you get to the manager position, you know it all. You don't need to learn anymore. You're just schooled, already schooled. Right, so as I was saying, is here we have 3 types of interviews. EPSO competencies, which is like a general interview, then field related, which is the Annex 1 duties, and situational judgment. And either they come together in one interview, if, for example, you go for a contractual agent position, right? They will put all 3 types of questions in one, and you will get them in an interview. Yes, and in an internal competition as well. For example, they come together in the interview. But if you go for specific exams like expert exams or other institutions, then they could have it separate. So they could have a EPSO competencies, a CBI, or they could have a field related, or they could have a situational CBI. So in any case, either you get them separate or you get them together, you will have these kind of interviews. And with that, I think that I followed, or how to say, went through, overviewed the EPSO selection process.